I didn't come to this work from a textbook. I came to it from a household, a neurodivergent teenager, a reactive dog, and several years of trying to figure out both of them without a framework, without credentials, and without anyone telling me that what I was doing was actually harder than it looked. I became a professional dog trainer and certified family dog mediator later than I expected, and by then I had already lived most of what the coursework taught me. I recognized the concepts not because I had studied them, but because I had felt them. In the difficult mornings, the unexpected setbacks, the small moments of connection that arrived without warning and meant more than I could explain. What I have, now that I didn't have then, is language, a framework, the ability to look at a hard situation and understand what's actually happening instead of just surviving it. But there are things I wish someone had told me before the framework arrived. Things that aren't in the research papers, or the breed recommendation articles, or the well-meaning advice from people who had typical households and typical dogs. This episode is about 4 of them. This is Under the Same Roof. I'm Jennyfer Tan, certified family dog mediator and professional dog trainer, and this is episode 8, the season finale. Before I get into what I wish someone had told me, I want to take a moment to look at where we've been, because we've covered a lot of ground together, and I don't want to leave it without naming what it was. We started with a scene in a condo hallway, a teenage boy, a dog, 2 nervous systems that had taken years to learn to be near each other without it costing anything, and a question underneath it: what did it actually take to get there? Why did nobody in either world, not the dog world, not the neurodivergent parenting world, prepare me for that journey? That question became this series. In episode 2, we looked at the difference between drilling commands and teaching concepts. Why a dog who knows something in the living room can't access it on the sidewalk. Why a child who has practiced a skill dozens of times at home loses it entirely in a loud cafeteria. And why pushing harder in those moments, the instinct almost everyone reaches for, makes things measurably worse. In episode 3, we talked about what progress actually looks like when it's happening inside a nervous system rather than on a performance chart, the stress bucket, the bad day that isn't regression, the skill that disappeared, not because it was lost, but because the bandwidth to reach for it wasn't there. In episode 4, we shifted perspective entirely. Not what the dog is doing, what he is experiencing, what Roscoe was absorbing in a household where someone large, unpredictable, and heavy-handed was also navigating the world. What it costs a cautious dog to live with chronic low-grade stress that nobody is tracking because everyone is tracking something else. In episode 5, we got into the feedback loop. 2 nervous systems in the same room, reading each other, both escalating, neither of them choosing to. What co-regulation means when it works in the wrong direction, and what it looks like to interrupt that loop, not at the top, where it's already too late, but at the bottom, where the signals are still small and there's still room to act. In episode 6, we stepped back from my household and spoke directly to families who are still at the beginning, who are standing in front of a decision with a breed list and good intentions, and a question that isn't quite the right one. What the breed lists are actually measuring, what they're missing, and what 5 questions, drawn from the L.E.G.S model developed by Kim Brophy, author of Meet Your Dog and the founder of Family Dog Mediation, can tell you that a temperament category never will. And in episode 7, we talked about the bond that looks different, the one that arrives without announcement on an unremarkable afternoon, tucked into the crook of an arm, the one that the research describes in outcomes but never in texture, the the one that needs someone paying close enough attention to see it. That's season 1. 8 episodes about seeing, really seeing, what's happening in a household like this one. About the framework, the nervous systems, the feedback loops, the signals, the slow and imperfect accumulation of understanding that makes everything that follows possible. Now, what nobody told me. The first thing is this: the hardship is part of it, not a detour from it. When we got Roscoe, I had a picture in my mind of how it would go. The research on dogs and autism is genuinely promising. I believed it. I still believe it. But research describes outcomes. It doesn't describe the middle. The middle, in our case, was a hyper puppy who overwhelmed the teenager he was supposed to help. Nobody told me that this was normal, that the gap between the research and the reality wasn't evidence that I'd chosen wrong or failed to make it work, that the difficulty wasn't a detour from the story. It was the story, the part that gets skipped over in the summaries because it's hard to make it sound worth it until you're on the other side. I'm on the other side of some of it now, not all of it, but enough to say the hardship was not a sign that something had gone wrong. It was the education. Everything I now understand about dogs, about nervous systems, about what it means to share a home with two beings whose needs don't always align. I learned it there, in the difficult middle, before I had a single credential to my name. The framework came later and gave me the words. The living gave me the understanding. The second thing nobody tells you is that the guilt will be one of the hardest parts. Not the logistics, not the exhaustion, the guilt. It comes from both directions at once, which is what makes it so relentless. You feel it toward your child, for the moments you defaulted to frustration when he needed patience, for the times you expected neurotypical responses from a brain that doesn't work that way, for the ordinary human failures of a parent who is doing their best, but whose best is sometimes not enough for that particular day. And you feel it toward the dog, for not knowing what he was telling you, for missing the signals that now seem so obvious, for all the times his stress bucket was filling quietly while your attention was somewhere else, because your attention had to be somewhere else entirely. The cruelty of this guilt is that it arrives most heavily in the moments when you already have the least capacity. You're not lying awake, cataloging your failures on the easy days. You're doing it on the days when everything was already hard, when the household took more than it had, when both of them needed more than you could give. And then you add the weight of self-accounting on top of an already depleted system. What I know now is that the guilt, as relentless as it feels, is not an accurate measure of anything. It is not measuring how good a parent you are, or how good a dog guardian you are. It is measuring how much you care. Those are not the same thing, even though they feel identical from the inside. Neither Roscoe nor my son was keeping the ledger I was keeping. They were just looking for me, and I was there, imperfect and uncertain, and sometimes completely at a loss. But there. That, it turns out, counted for more than I gave it credit for. The third thing, the love is unconditional in a direction you didn't expect. I expected to love them unconditionally. That part I was prepared for. What I wasn't prepared for was that they would love me that way too. Not because I had it figured out, not because I was doing it right, but simply because I was theirs. My son, who I couldn't always reach, who I failed in ordinary ways on ordinary days, who I sometimes met with the wrong response at the wrong moment, he still came back. He has grown into a capable young adult, navigating a world that wasn't built for his brain, and somewhere in the foundation of that is the fact that someone kept trying to understand him even when she didn't know how. And Roscoe, This cautious, complicated, reactive dog who took so long to trust anyone, including me. He finds me in the mornings. He settles when he hears my voice. He has, over time, decided that I am safe. Not because I was a perfect guardian, because I stayed, and I kept learning, and eventually the learning caught up to the loving. The process of getting there, the not knowing, the guilt, the gap between expectation and reality, that process is not separate from the love. It is the love. It's what love actually looks like when it's doing the hard work rather than just the easy parts. The fourth thing, and this is the one I most want to leave you with. I became a professional dog trainer and certified family dog mediator after living all of this. The credentials gave me frameworks and language and the ability to help other families find their way through it more clearly than I found mine. I'm glad I have them. I use them every day. But the most important thing I know, the thing that sits underneath every assessment, every consultation, every conversation with a family who is in the difficult middle and can't yet see the other side, I didn't learn in a course. I learned it in a loud condo with a cautious dog and a complicated teenager on the days when I had no idea what I was doing and kept going anyway. Keeping things going is not the consolation prize for not having it figured out. It is the whole thing. It is how the understanding accumulates. It is how the trust gets built, rung by rung, in both directions at once. It is how you end up, years later, watching a dog choose the crook of your son's arm on an ordinary afternoon, and understanding, finally, what it took to get there. That's the part nobody tells you, and it's the part that matters most. Season 1 has been about seeing, about building the framework, understanding the nervous systems, learning to read what's actually happening in a household like this one before trying to do anything about it, understanding before strategies, always. Season 2 is about what happens after the seeing, because understanding changes you, but it doesn't change your morning. You still have to get up. You still have to clip the leash on. You still have to navigate the world with this dog and this child and this life that looks nothing like what you planned. Season 2 is about that gap, the one between Insight and Tuesday. We're going to talk about beginnings, the specific unglamorous reality of those first weeks, when a dog and a neurodivergent child are figuring each other out and nobody's arriving with a roadmap. We're going to talk about routine, not as a system to implement, but as something a family builds together without always realizing they're building it, and what happens to everyone when it breaks down. We're going to talk about the accidental things, the bond that nobody designed, the dog who became something essential to your child without anyone deciding that was the plan, the way love in a complicated household distributes itself in complicated ways, to the dog, between siblings, between partners who are both doing their best and sometimes doing it very differently. We're going to sit in the hard moments without rushing out of them, the afternoon when everything is too much for everyone at once, the day you realize the dog is carrying something he was never asked to carry, the slow, quiet discovery that your neurotypical daughter has been translating between two worlds her entire life, and you only just noticed. And we're going to meet more of this household. Ray, who has been here all along, not the anxious one, not the fearful one, but the one who simply knows when to leave the room and does it without apology. My husband, who holds things together in the way that people who hold things together often do, without much fanfare, without a podcast. My daughter, who grew up inside all of this and became, without anyone planning it, her own kind of fluent. Season 2 is coming. I'll see you there. Thank you for being here for Season 1 of Under the Same Roof. Thank you for listening to the hard parts, for sitting with the uncertainty, for recognizing yourselves in this household, or in the families I've described, or in the questions that don't have clean answers. If this series has done what I hoped it would do, you're leaving it not with a protocol, but with a different way of seeing. Your dog, your child, the household you're all building together, without a roadmap, one ordinary day at a time. That's enough. That's everything. I'm Jennyfer Tan. This is Under the Same Roof. Understanding before strategies. Always.